Greetings! I am Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm going to build this 28mm scale plastic T-34-85. As you can probably see on the packaging, this is made by Warlord games for their game Bolt Action. Some of you will already have seen me build this. I filmed this video while streaming the build. If you would like to see future model building streams, check out the link to my Twitch channel in the description. Currently I'm doing modelling streams most Sundays at 8 or 9 local time, that's GMT plus 10. You can figure out what that time is for yourself, or you can follow me over on Twitch and you'll be notified when I go live. Okay, enough rambling. Let's have a look at what's inside the box. Plastic. Plastic is inside the box. Who'd have thought? This model is made up of 2 sprues, and they are quite good looking. I do believe this is one of the earlier plastic kits offered by Warlord Games, and if I'm honest, it's a little better than I was expecting. It's nice and neatly moulded, and I wasn't able to find any glaring errors or defects. There aren't a whole lot of parts here, but there's enough to build the tank, and that's probably about all we really need. Be quiet, Bitsbox, I'll feed you later. There is a commander figure included, and I do like that he comes with different arm options, one of which is pointing. It's good to have variety. I'm not going to use the crew figure, but it's nice that it's there. Some of the detail is a little bit simplified, and a few of the bits are a little bit chunky, which to be fair is a pretty common thing on wargaming kits like this one. I think it's especially obvious on the whole rear. It has holes there on the little round hatch instead of bolt detail, which should be raised. A weird choice, but hey, it's not the worst thing in the world. Other than that, everything is pretty good. The mould lines are rather minor, though of course they do still need removal. In addition to the plastic sprues, you'll find one of the fire and damage marker kits that are now common on pretty much all wargaming models. I must have at least 1,000 of these in my drawer by now. There's also this stat card, which has stats for the tank, which is not at all surprising. This is helpful as a quick glance reference when playing Bolt Action, obviously. Decals are included too. This is a pretty good little sheet with a lot of different markings, including Polish and Finnish markings, alongside the Soviet markings that you would expect. Very cool, and I must admit that I am kind of tempted to paint this tank as Rudy. In addition to all of that, we get the instructions. You can tell this is an older kit from this sheet. They make, in my opinion, much better looking instruction booklets nowadays. This is still easy enough to understand and follow, though it does seem a little bit poorly laid out. The track assembly instructions are on the side that comes after the part where you put the tracks on the hull. Not really a big issue, and you can take care of it by simply turning the page over, which I'm sure most of us are capable of. It's just a little bit odd. Oh well, let's put this thing together. It seemed like the instructions wanted the turret built first, and in order to not anger the instructions gods, that's what I did. And why not start by drilling out the gun barrel? As long as you're reasonably careful and neat with this, and get the hole somewhat close to centered, this will add a lot to the model, at least in my opinion. I put the barrel aside for now and then glued the 2 halves of the turret together. This is pretty simple. There isn't any keying, but the parts are shaped such that they'll go together pretty neatly and you can easily eyeball the positioning and get it right. That said, there is still a bit of a gap around this, and the plastic seems to be a little bit discoloured above the gap all the way around. The result is okay anyway. Next comes the gun mantlet. I'm pretty sure I've installed this the right way up, so that the gun is slightly to the tank's right, though it could fit either way. The mantlet seems to be slightly recessed into the turret, as you can see from above. I'm not entirely sure it should be like this, but it's not so easy to notice from any angles except above, so I'm sure it's fine. I then add the commander's hatch. Obviously you would model this in the open position if you want to add the commander. I'm not doing that, so closed it is. The fit isn't perfect, I had to nudge it a bit and apply some pressure to it. In the end, it looks decent enough. We can blame any gaps on good strong Soviet construction. Next, the main gun goes into the appropriate location on the front of the turret. The fit is pretty good. It's not keyed and it doesn't really need to be. There's no muzzle brake after all. Just make sure that you've got it aligned nice and straight. Check from above and the sides. And that's the turret completed. Well, there is one detail to come later, but for now it's complete. Nice and easy too. Next, I assemble the tracks, because why not? Each track set is made up of 3 parts. I was expecting these to be kind of bad, just because that's a pretty reasonable expectation for tracks where the treads come as 2 parts. But you know what? These ones aren't too bad at all. I attach the top section of tracks first. I use the little slots in the back of the treads and wheel parts to line things up nice and neat. There's no keying, so it doesn't lock into place or anything fancy like that, but it's not too hard to eyeball it. The back of the tracks should sit flush with the back of the wheels part. You might not be surprised to learn that the lower set of tracks goes on next. I put the part in place, and again, there's no keying, but it is easy enough to eyeball the fit at both ends. I think I managed to do this fairly neatly. There is one problem here though. There's too much space around the drive wheel, and it's quite pronounced. But if you're really keen to hide it, you could just slop a bunch of mud in there when you paint the tank. I tried adding glue and pressing the tracks down so that it looks like they're sagging down below the wheel. Probably doesn't fool anybody, but whatever. I don't think it's the worst thing ever. It is now time to build the hull. But first, the instructions suggest adding this little thingy. This is, obviously, to hold the turret in place, which I don't really want. And I doubt many gamers would want either. I mean, how do you take the turret off to represent a destroyed vehicle? I guess somebody would want this, and it is nice to have the choice, but I'm not going to be using it. I did briefly consider magnetizing the turret, but you would have to do a bit of plastic surgery to do that, and I didn't really feel like it. Now I join the 2 halves of the hull together. This goes together pretty easily. There's no keying per se, but it should be obvious when you've got the parts sitting in place properly. I apply pressure, focusing that mostly on the front of the hull, and a bit at the rear, those being the least desirable places to have gaps. This is looking quite hully, so why not give it some tracks, just to make it look that little bit better. I slather a load of glue on the sides of the hull, and then put the track assemblies on. You could probably put these on backwards, but don't. The notches in the side of the track parts lock into the bars on the side of the hull, which obviously makes it super easy to get these into place. Still, you might want to apply a little bit of pressure in towards the centre of the vehicle. You might also notice that I've missed something. Yep, I'm a dunce. You know that. The final drive casings should be installed before the tracks. Fortunately, I was still able to slot them into place without having to try and rip the tracks off. It does mean that it was a little bit harder to apply gap minimizing pressure, but I used my knife and tried applying pressure that way. There is still a bit of a gap there, but it's nowhere near as bad a gap as it would have been if I couldn't get the part into place. So now that you've seen this, you'll know not to make that mistake. I've already done it for you. Then come the exhausts. Installing these is pretty straightforward. They slot nice and easily into the recesses on the rear of the hull. There does seem to be a small gap between the edges of the exhaust covers and the hull, but it could be worse. Next come the toolboxes. There are 2 of these. Often on the T-34s they will be different sizes, but not so here. That's okay, I'll install both, though I'm pretty sure you don't have to. There are guide nubs for these, so just place those on the nubs. Very easy. I'm pretty sure I got these on around the right side with the hingy bits facing in towards the hull. Then I install the machine gun. This pretty much just slotted right into the hole on the raised bit on the front of the hull. You know, where the MG goes. This kit also comes with an option for a flamethrower that goes into this position as well. Next, I install the headlamp into the hole at the front left of the hull. This was surprisingly less fiddly than I was expecting. Still, it did need a bit of nudging, though still pretty easy to get positioned right. The spare track links can then be glued onto the front of the hull. These are of course optional, but I always think T-34 hulls look much better with the tracks here, so I'll usually install them. And that's the hull detailing done. I mean, besides the fuel drums, and those are optional. Before we get to those though, there is still one thing to add to the turret. This antenna. This is very easy to install. It goes right into this mounting hole here. Nudge it a bit so that it's straight, and that's that. I do kind of think this antenna might get broken quite easily, but maybe not. You could also replace it with some wire or something like that if you wanted. I'm not going to be doing that. I'm going to move on to the external fuel tanks. These are keyed and go together nice and easily. I apply pressure, trying to make sure that my gap minimization efforts were focused on the side that would be most visible. There are also some drums for the whole rear, but I decided not to add those. I'm sure they go together just as easily as the ones I've just built. Because I don't want to install the rear drums, I also need to remove the mounting nubs. This was a bit fiddly and a little time consuming. I went carefully with my knife, doing my best to avoid slicing off any bolt details or my fingers. In the end I got there, and I've still got all my fingers, I think. Then I glued the external fuel drums into place. These go on easily on the big and obvious mounting knobs. Unfortunately, on the right side of the tank, the hand railing interferes with the forward fuel tank. It's pretty obvious from some angles. It would have been easy enough to shave down the hand railing, but I figured an imperfect fuel drum looks a bit more Soviet, so I didn't do anything about it. Then the turret sits in place nicely atop the hull, and the 28mm scale T-34-85 from Warlord Games is now complete. Let's quickly have a look at this next to my Rubicon T-34-85, which has obviously been painted. You can tell because it's not grey. I think both of these kits are quite good, though they do both have their pros and cons. There are obvious differences, like the tracks, where Warlord's kit has much better detail by far. I would argue that the rest of the details on the Rubicon model do look a little bit better though. That said, they're not all that different. If I recall correctly, the Rubicon kit came with different choices for the road wheels, and it does include spare track links that you can pile onto the side of the hull. The Warlord kit doesn't really come with any options beyond the flamethrower. That's okay though. I think both models are quite good, and I don't really favour one over the other. Well, I do think the one I painted looks way better, but that's not really got anything to do with the kits themselves. I'm not going to tell you what to buy, but you can look at both of these models and decide for yourself. That is if you are in the market for a 28mm scale T-34-85. So I quite liked this kit. It was fun to build and it looks pretty good. The main complaint I have with it is the gap around the drive sprocket, and that's not really too bad at all. Everything went together pretty easily, even when I messed up by not placing the final drives before the tracks. There aren't any major gaps, and the ones that are there will be pretty easy to fill in. It is certainly one of Warlord's earlier plastic offerings, and compared to their newer stuff I do think it shows, especially in terms of options and extra bits. That's not a complaint at all, more I think it's just worth pointing out that they've improved over time. The kit was pretty quick to build, just about the right length of time for a stream actually, in my opinion anyway. Like I said at the start of the video, I have decided to start doing modelling streams, and the building of this kit was the first of those streams. Currently I'll be doing them on Sunday mornings, my time that is. Follow me on Twitch, the link for which is below, and you'll hopefully be notified when I go live. The more of you that watch the streams, the better. My intent is to do giveaways at some point on stream if it becomes viable to do so. Just saying. Either way, it's good times and it would be nice if you came to hang out. That might be enough rambling. What do you think about this kit? Have you built it before? Let me know in the comments section below, along with any other comments or questions you might have. Also, don't forget to subscribe, follow, ring the bell, and all the other things you do on YouTube and social media. Links to all of the things, including Patreon and Twitch, are in the description below. And, as always, I shall return soon. So until then, be excellent to each other, and thanks for watching. Farewell.